Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts. My guest today has been a passionate martial artist since 1968. Throughout the years, he's trained with Tom Meyers in Erie, Pennsylvania, and even with Billy Blanks. At just 17 years old, he took a big step by opening his own school in 1974, marking the beginning of a lifelong commitment to teaching and sharing martial arts. A dedicated family man, he's a proud father of 8 children, each of them holding black belts in martial arts, with 4 of his sons following in his teaching path. Please welcome my guest today, Mr. David Humes. How are you doing today, David?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Brian.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. I know we've had to reschedule a few times, and we both dealt with some crazy weather over the last month. So I'm glad we're finally able to do this.
Oh, absolutely.
I know you said you've listened to some episodes, so you kind of know what we do. But what I want to do is I want to go back to the very beginning. I mentioned 1968, but I want to know what led to that, how that all started. Kind of walk us through the beginning of your martial arts journey.
Okay. In 68, I was about 11 years old, and there was a bully in our neighborhood at the time. And, we were playing on the playground, and this bully took an apple and wrapped ice around it. And about 5 foot away, he threw it, and it hit my ear, my left ear. Dang. And I remember running to my mom crying, took me to the hospital, and it broke my eardrum and caused nerve deafness. And from that day on, I can't hear out of my left ear. Wow. So I remember when I was in the hospital, I said that will never happen to me again. So I went out looking for a karate school and found Tom Meyers at the time, and started in 1968, right after that happened, and never looked back. And that was my main, because of a bully. And wow. To this day that, we teach, at our karate school, that defend yourself, defend people that get picked on by bullies. And I do not like to tolerate bullies because of what happened, but that's why I started. But once I did start, I was just hooked on it. I just loved martial arts. Wow. So that's how I got started.
So when you went looking for a school, was that the first one you find? Was there other ones you looked at that maybe weren't a good fit? Or
yeah, there was, at that time in Erie, there was Tom Meyers, which was Tang Sudo, and there was another instructor in Erie that taught Goshin. And I'm not, all martial arts are wonderful, I think, but it's what you are drawn to. And I was more drawn to the Tang Sudo instead of the Goshin, so I liked the Korean style better. So I did look around a little bit, to be honest, one other school. Okay. And then I ended up at Tom Meyers, and then I lived on 2nd Street at the time, and Billy Blanks lived on 3rd Street. And me and Billy, I think Billy's maybe 6 months older than me. Oh, wow. And we became friends, and he got his black belt first, and then I got mine shortly after Billy. And Billy and I trained. When I was young, Billy, everybody would be, going out and partying and doing this. Not Billy. Billy would just constantly work out. And even when we were young, I knew, he wanted to pursue this even more than I did at the time. And then I think it was around 73, that Billy said, "Hey, Dave, come to Massachusetts with me." And I said, "No, I'm going to stay home. I'm going to stay in Erie." And so he went off to the Boston area, started a school. And then I saw him at a couple of tournaments throughout the years. And then he moved to Studio City, California. And then he went on to, bigger and better things. Mm-hmm. But Billy was wonderful. Always stuck up for me in the beginning. And back in 68, there was just a few a few of us that were in at that time. Tom Meyers taught at the Martin Luther King Center, and predominantly it was probably he had about 35 black students, and I was the only white student. And
wow.
I was kind of intimidated, but Billy just was wonderful to me. I mean, he made me feel at home, and he, there was no color in his eyes. I mean, it didn't matter. I mean, and back then in '68, there was some people that didn't see it the way we saw it. So it was kind of hard in the beginning, but Billy just kept on saying, "No, everything's going to be good." And then through the years, and it got, more and more, then it kind of even out toward the end. But it was intimidating at first, but again, the love of the art and the love that I had once we started competing, I mean, it opened my world up, because up to that point, I never was out of Erie. And then all of a sudden, Billy and I was going to, I mean, it was relatively from Erie, it's 100 miles to Pittsburgh, 100 miles to Buffalo, 100 miles to Cleveland. So we went to all the close tournaments at first, and then we started getting further and further away. But it just opened my eyes in so many ways, so many ways.
Do you keep in touch with Billy?
Only when I see him at tournaments. The last time we talked, it was kind of ironic, about 3 years ago, because again, we started karate around the same time, and we're about the same age. I'm 67. I think he's 68. And I'm right-legged predominantly, and Billy was left-legged. And in August, I had my left hip replaced. 6 months later, Billy had his right hip replaced. And it was kind of ironic because, because of that constant redundant, because Billy and I always did basically, we would get up in front of the class, and we would always, we would lead, and we would also do, like if we did, say, 20 side kicks every class, we would do it. We wouldn't just stand around. We would do the kicks. And after 60 years of doing all the side kicks and roundhouse and all the kicks, both our hips gave out almost at the same time. It was like, so we kind of giggled about that. But cool. I haven't talked to him, though, in about 3 years, though.
That's cool. I mean, that's cool that you bump into each other at a tournament, and I'm assuming it's like almost like no time has passed. You just pick up and start chatting.
Yeah. He was a big, I mean, even though we were, like I said, he got his black belt first, and we were both black belts together, but he had this thing about him. Now, honestly, if you would have, I mean, he just had that, he wanted to keep working harder than you, wanted to just keep getting better and better and better. Like at the Martin Luther King Center on Sundays, Tom Meyers would have an open class. And every Sunday, people would come in, either hungover or talk about what they did the night before. Billy'd be over in the corner punching and kicking the bag and, just constantly working out, where all of us, we'd be complaining about what we did the night before. And, Billy had his eye on something that, that we didn't all see, but Billy knew he was going to make it. So I'm very happy for him. I really am.
That's cool.
I'm glad that he made it that big.
I know you mentioned, you're pretty much your main instructor over all these years was Tom Meyers. What are some things that stand out about him and his style of teaching that you think kind of drew you into that? I
think the repetition, my mantra is almost the same. I use this term, one more time. If I say, okay, we're going to do 10 kicks, and then I would say one more time, or we'd go over a self-defense move, I'd say one more time. Well, Tom did that, and just the way he would always make you feel like you were doing good, but he would criticize you and say, no, your knees need to be bent, your hands are not right. I mean, he was always took the time to work with me. And I think seeing that Tom Meyers, he cared about everybody, not just his star student Billy, but all his other black belts. He genuinely cared. And that's one of the things that I've tried to imitate, that from a 5-year-old to the oldest person in the class, I try to make them be like at board breaking. Every Christmas, we have a Christmas party and a board breaking, and we try to make everybody shine. You can come up and you can break 8 boards, 5 boards, all the way from the black belts down to the little peewees. And I remember Tom would always try to make everybody shine. And I try to do that very same thing with the kids. And when you get feedback from the parents, they love it, that you really care about my child. And that's one of the things that Tom really ingrained in me. Everybody is a star, not just, the Billy Blanks or the Bruce Lees, but, everybody can shine at this. So Tom he cared, I guess.
That's cool.
He cared.
And you mentioned tournaments. So is there something, kind of what drew you to the competition side, or is that something, did just everyone do it and you didn't really have a choice? How was it at that school?
Tom, we went to a few tournaments, but Tom always thought that you never have to go to a tournament if you don't want to.
Nice.
But Billy, me, and a few of us, we would get the Martin Luther King Center's van, and we would go to tournaments just because we loved it. It was ingrained. After, working out with each other and beating each other up, now it was time to go out there and we think we're good enough to compete. So we started competing in just fighting, and then we added the kata, then we added self-defense, and then weapon kata. So it was we just moved in from competing with each other. We thought, well, now it's time to move out there. And that's when we started competing. And I remember, to be honest, my first competition, I know this sounds, when I told my son this, he goes, that's not a real name. I said, Jacob, it is. I remember, I think I was a green belt, and this kid's name was Manny Penny. And my son goes, no, that's Dad. No. And I said, honest, I still remember his name. And back then, you didn't have no hand pads. The foam dips weren't invented yet. That's how old I am.
Yep.
And we were sparring, and back then, blood overruled. And I had a big toenail, and I cut his nose bad, and it was bleeding. And my first tournament, I was disqualified. So that, I went, well, I felt bad, but that taught me clip my toenails. So, and then foam dip came, and then, the pads came. But that was my first recollection of my first tournament. Then my second tournament, I actually won, and I remember that. But I remember my first one, though, because I actually got disqualified. So that's how I started the competition-wise. I just fell in love with it.
That's actually funny. My good friend in high school, he was a foreign exchange student from Italy, and he came over and he joined. He had trained in Wadu Ryu back in Italy, and over in my hometown we had the Tung Sudo school, and he joined and he went to his first tournament, and he also got kicked out of his first tournament for excessive force, actually.
Oh wow!
And it wasn't even it wasn't even a hard punch. It's just that in his style back home, they didn't really pull the punches. So he contacted a bit. It wasn't like he didn't knock the guy down. He hit him, and it was a hit that someone like me or you would probably brushed off and be like whatever. But at yellow belt level, I was like excessive force, and he was out with like no warning. So
and you remember that? Like I said, that was 50 some years ago, and I remember his name, and I remember seeing his nose was bleeding. It was you remember that, so it kind of stays with you.
My first tournament, I've only done one. My first tournament, I got my headgear kicked off. So I don't remember his name, but I remember the tournament very well.
Wow, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Now you mentioned competing in weapons. What was your go-to weapon or your favorite weapon to compete with?
Actually, 3 weapons are my bow is my go-to, but back in 73 when Bruce Lee Entered the Dragon, he introduced, the bow, the screamer sticks, kamas, nunchucks. So I started dabbling with nunchucks, and I got pretty good at it just from watching Bruce Lee. So then I remember we had certain katas. And we didn't really, at that time in Tung Sudo, we didn't really have any good patterns of weapons. So what I did is I took like a Pinyon 4 or Kata 4, and I put nunchucks in my hand and did the pattern, but I would, instead of empty hands, now all of a sudden I got my nunchucks.
Nice.
And I incorporated in there. And I remember I took second place to the first tournament I did my nunchucks. And I went, wow, this works. So with that format, then I did a Kama Kata and then Bow Kata. And those are the 3 that I still those are the three big ones in our school that we still teach the most. We do dabble with a little bit of sword, eskrima sticks, a little bit of tonfa, and
I love
that's about it.
My original Tang Soo Do instructor, who was actually one of the first guests on my show, he does a lot with cane. And I just wonder, I wasn't sure if that was something that's normal in Tang Soo Do, but he does a lot of cane self-defense.
I have seen it though.
Okay.
I have seen that before though.
And he's one of the schools that switched to Subak Do also over the years.
Oh,
so
okay.
Maybe that has something to do with it.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Cool.
Wow.
And then you mentioned, some of the stuff you learned from him from Tom as a teacher and stuff. And obviously you've been teaching for a long time. What led you to the teaching path? What do you think made you want to teach?
As I said earlier, just seeing Tom's, the want, the care to get you better, to get you, and it wasn't just in martial art, it was like life's little lessons. I mean, he, always said, don't steal, don't, just always, not just a martial arts, but life lesson itself. And then just seeing that and seeing how good of a teacher he was. I remember as a green belt, actually, Tom would take me and Billy, and he would have us help teach. So he would break, like if there was like 40 people, he would break the group into, white belts, green belts, blue belts. And he would always put me, if I started teaching as a green belt, I would have from green and below. And when he gave me that opportunity, I ran with it. I loved it. The more I taught, the more I understood the kata. The more I taught about fighting, I understood fighting better. It was, as I was teaching, it was helping me in, oh my gosh, so many ways. It was just, I was getting better. I was, I was like a sponge then. And then in 74, 75-ish, I remember I still went to Tom, but I went to him and because I know at that time there was some of the black belts that broke off with him without telling him, and that was like taboo back then. Yeah. So I went and I said, Master Tom, I would like to start a karate school. He said, yeah, do it. And I remember going into a Salvation Army on the 11th, and they had like an auditorium, and that was my first karate school. And I believe I called it, the name of our karate school now is Hume's Martial Arts or Waterford Karate Academy. But back then I called it Erie Fighting Academy. And from teaching there in my first school at the Salvation Army Center, I was hooked. I loved it. And then when it started to grow, the Salvation Army, after I was there about a year and a half, and they said, you're starting to make money, you're starting to get more people, so you have to leave. I went, So I made the move, and it was kind of hard at first to get started, but I went to a strip mall and had a storefront, and best thing I ever did. I was there for literally 40 years and loved it. Absolutely being pushed. And again, I don't think if they did not ask me to leave, I probably would have just, humbly stayed there. But being pushed to go outside my comfort zone, to go out on a limb, and I'm glad I did, because it just opened so many doors and made our school just that much more successful. So, yeah, that's how I got started on teaching, just from the Salvation Army Center to our main school. It was just, I could not stop teaching. I just love it. And here I am, 67, and I'm still teaching.
That's good. So do you remember then that your very first class at the Salvation Army, how many students were in your very first class?
Yes, I do. There was roughly, and I don't laugh at this number, there was about 7.
Hey, that's not bad.
I remember there were 7 young kids, and I remember, and I don't know why, I remember having butterflies, and I'm thinking, wait, I've been doing this back at the Martin Luther King Center. I taught from when I was a green belt. Now I'm a black belt, my own school. I was nervous that first time, but I think just the excitement, just knowing that I can't go to Tom or I can't go to Billy. I'm on my own now. Yeah. So, but after that though, I started getting, obviously the butterflies went away and everything worked out. So, but I do remember there was 7, and it grew in a year and a half. I was probably, when I left there, the number wasn't real big, but it was like 26, 27, something like that.
Okay. So back then, so how did you, like when you first decided to go on your own and open it, how did you promote it? Like, did you take an advertisement somewhere? What did you do?
Before, I don't know what some of the laws are now. I know now, like if you put up a flyer, I think you almost at most of the areas or the stores here, you have to have a permit. You have to get, okay. Wow. Back then, I remember I went to the library and copied Erie Fighting Academy, the Salvation Army classes Monday, Thursday, just a real simple thing. And then I would post it. I would post it in supermarkets. I would put it on people's cars, which I found out is illegal too at that time.
Yeah.
So I did things I didn't know, I just, but that's how I did get the word out, by doing something I shouldn't have been doing.
That's good though. I mean, it's always interesting to hear, how back then, because I memean, now obviously everyone just goes on social media and posts things, but I'm still a poster guy. Like even for like my podcast, when I first, even though my podcast has listeners around the world, I still, I put up posters locally and stuff, and other radio shows I had in the past, I'd go and put flyers up at grocery stores and everything, same type thing. I still do that kind of stuff. So
I still believe in the old fashioned. When I see a poster or if I see a flyer, I read it. I know most things. Like my younger son Jacob, he does, like you said, everything on social media, and it blows my mind how much he can do from his bedroom.
Yep.
It's like, oh my gosh, it would take me 6 months to accomplish what you just did in an hour. It is amazing.
Technology can be good, but can also be scary. So definitely.
Yes.
So do you think at any point now you started, you opened your own school at the age of 17, was there any like pushback? Oh, you're, from students, oh, you're too young. Why would we listen to a 17? Did you experience any of that?
I can't remember any of that. I remember when I did get into my main school, and I was now probably in my 20s. And then I would get a little bit of pushback from, say, somebody that was like 35, and they were in either football or some type of sport, and they got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I remember a few times that you earn respect, and I had to earn their respect. I had to show them that who's in charge, me. I want, and I'm not being arrogant, just to teach the way that we teach, do it our way, not your way, because they would come in and they would try to street fight, or they would try to say, no, this way's better. No, we're going to do it this way. Okay. So, there was a few cases, and it was mainly at age, like they were maybe 15 years older than me, but nothing bad that sticks out in my mind, real bad, but there was a few.
And back then, were you primarily teaching adults, or when did you start teaching kids?
When I was at the Salvation Army, it was all kids.
Okay.
But the minute that I hit the storefront, then it was a lot of adults back then. And I noticed it's been highs and lows all these years, but I know in the last, I want to say since COVID, having men and women is very hard to get in. It's usually the parents, after they see their kids in it for 6-7 months, then the parents will join. It's very seldom now do we just get men and women right off the street. I mean, it's like there's been a change in the paradigm that before, young 30-year-old men, 25-year-old women would walk in and want to learn stuff, either self-defense for the women, or the guys just want to learn how to defend themselves or how to fight, or maybe they want to do competition. But now it's mainly kids. And then the adult is made up by the parents of the kids. Okay. Which is probably since COVID. It's been, I don't know if that is universal, but at least in our area, that seems to be what it is now.
Yeah, I think it does vary, because I've asked similar questions to different guests and I've gotten different answers. So it really must depend on the area. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah. Do you remember the very first student you had that started with you at white belt and went all the way to black?
Obviously, my first son.
Oh, okay.
Todd Humes. He went on to, he hit the national scene and he tore it up. He was 7-time grand champion nationally. He was super, super wonderful. And when he was 2 years old, I started because Daddy owned a karate school. He came to karate, but the 2-year-old, he just played, and just by proxy, just by being there, he was getting little bits and pieces. Mm-hmm. And then it was almost like magically when he was about 6 years old, he did this beautiful kata and his fighting started getting better. And it was like, he didn't look, he was like a playground. It wasn't like that he wasn't really comprehending because he was only 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. Yeah. But then it was like something happened when he was 6, 7, it all clicked. And so about a year later, I gave him his black belt. And that was a big, big controversy in our area that how dare you give a 8, 9-year-old a black belt in our area. I was almost all the other black belts in Erie wanted to blackball me. They said that to be a black belt, you got to be 15 at that time. And I said, well, I've been going to national tournaments and I see lots of junior black belts in different areas, but not our area. So I stuck it out and I had at some tournaments, even at a young age, I could put him in the, not fighting, but the black belt kata. And he won. And I remember we were in Ohio and a gentleman by the name of Spider Kennedy. He's a well-known black belt from Ohio. And Spider was big in kata and he would win all the time. And my son Todd beat him fair and square. And all the other black belts were saying, no, he's too young. He shouldn't be in our division. And Spider stuck up. I remember he stuck up for Todd and me and said, hey, he might be only 9 years old, but he beat us. He beat us fair and square. Where do you guys go back to your dojo and work on your kata? He beat us.
Nice.
So that was a very enlightening moment that to me that, yeah, he might not be as strong as an average man or woman, but his ability to do the katas and the self-defense and to do everything that is required as a black belt other than his strength because of his, he's still small. Yeah. So he was a black belt and I kid you not, I think after all those other black belts in Erie said, how dare me, within a year, guess what other schools were doing?
Junior black
belts. They were giving up junior black belts to juniors. And I say that's one of the things that I did start in Erie. I know for a fact that we brought junior black belt to our area. And it was through that. And I remember I smiled, I kind of giggled and I went, because if they know all the requirements, other than their strength, obviously, they're a black belt, so I stood by that and I'm glad I did.
Nice. That's actually really, really cool. Think back to some of those very first classes you taught as a green belt to now. You're still teaching all these years later. What do you think has changed the most about your teaching style over the years?
Back then, I had only the one style, Tang Sudo. And Billy and I, we were hungry. We wanted more. So I went to a Taekwondo class. I wanted to get my black belt, and so did Billy. So Billy went, I believe, to the Buffalo area. And I went the opposite. There was a place in just about 50 miles away in Ohio that had Taekwondo. So I got my black belt in that. So when I started all the commercial katas like Chunji, Tangan, Tosan, all those, I thought they were a little bit better or commercially better. And, it went with, like you would teach white belts, Chunji and Tangan, yellow belts, Tosan and Wanhyo. So it was just easier. So I wrote not a book, but a book on, as a green belt, you're going to learn this. As a yellow belt, you're going to learn this. And then I added both art styles. Like we would do kata 1 and 2 out of Tang Sudo. And then in Taekwondo, we would just do maybe Chunji for the white belt. So I just had a lot more material from when I taught as a green belt. It was, again, Tom was wonderful, but it was limited. Mm-hmm. I think we had 10 katas and 10 or maybe 5 pinions. So there was only about 15 forms at that time. And couple, there were, some beginners, and some of the self-defense was just basic, like wrist grabs and headlocks and how to get out. So there was a limit, but again, Tom taught what he knew at that time for back then. So believe me, I'm not knocking him at all. As I've said, if it wasn't for him, I would not be the teacher I am today. But there was just, from the time that I was teaching as a green belt to now, there is just so much. I teach with that same passion that, one more time, to do it over and over, to really get good at it. And I harp on stances. Stances are everything. I'm like a broken record. I say it over and over and over again. But just the more I teach, kind of the same, a little bit more passionate than when I was young. But it's just, there's more detail. And as I got older, I would explain, it comes from your legs or it comes from your hips. It turns into this. And I understand a lot more, obviously, than I did back then. Okay. So I go into more detail now, but I feel the same. And I know that sounds, I tell my wife, I don't feel like I'm 67. I don't look like I'm 67. Mm-hmm. I've been on the go with martial arts and other things in my life. I just keep going. That keeps me young. So not much is, other than there's just a lot more, very passionate, and I'm into more detail. So that's the difference.
Okay. So you mentioned, Taekwondo. Have you dabbled in any other styles over the years?
Well, it was Taekwondo and Tang Soo Do, and then through the years, I would befriend different black belts in Shotokan, and they would show me one or two katas. And so we have Empi. We have a couple of katas that we incorporated into our style, that through our friendship of different black belts and different styles, mm-hmm. that I've incorporated into ours. And I've always believed that, as I mentioned earlier, all the styles are good. And like at a tournament, if I see something from a style that I don't even know very little about, and if it's good, I'm going to I don't want to use the term steal, but I'll take it. Mm-hmm. I'll get back to the dojo, work on it, incorporate it into ours. And that's why we have so much in our catalog. There's so much, because I just feel there's just so much. There's so much good martial arts out there. And one of the things that we did we added the Tang Soo Do in Taekwondo. Mm-hmm. And then, as I mentioned, my first son, Todd and I, this is back in 93, I saw the first UFC on TV. And it just blew me, and my son sat there and we watched, I want to say it was chemo or something like, he got his tooth, it come flying out, and I went, that's real. And I remember thinking, and then in the next couple episodes at seeing Hoist Gracie, I said, we got to learn that, because not all, but a lot of fights end up underground. Mm-hmm. And I thought we had the best stand-up, we were good. I've incorporated, some boxing with our stand-up. I thought, and then when I saw that, it changed my mind. So at that time at the Edinburgh University, which is 15, maybe 20 miles away from Erie, had a free MMA class and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on Saturday mornings. So I went, oh my gosh. So I went there, and I went there for about 8 years. I mean, because I loved it. Mm-hmm. I started going to the bookstore. I started getting tapes, and I just kept like a sponge. It was like, I wasn't bored with my two styles, but with this, it just opened up everything. You saw everything what it says, mixed martial arts. So after 8-9 years, I got pretty good. And then I got my black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I started teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it would be after, because it was, my wife at that time was saying, honey, you're spending so much time at the dojo and so many days. I had to squeeze that in. So after, on Mondays and Thursdays, let's say, after karate, the whole day of doing martial arts, then we would have an hour of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And we did that for many years.
Okay.
And just fell in love with it. I mean, it opened it up, because what if you do get knocked to the ground and somebody's on you? I didn't know what an arm bar was. I could not defend it. So it was just an awareness that at competition now, you would do, if you entered in self-defense And this was years ago. You would go up there and do 5 self-defense techniques out of your style. It'd be a block, palm hand, knock them down, go on one knee, do 3 punches, get up in a guard. Now, out of those 5 self-defense, you've got to have 3 submissions. It's like, because of the UFC, it affected at a lot of tournaments that self-defense aspect, that no longer could you just get away with doing what you learned in karate class. Now you have to end it. At least 3 of those 5 self-defense techniques that you do for competition, you have to have 3 submissions out of the 5. So it affected the self-defense aspect of tournaments in a big way. But no regrets. I'm glad that we added that. Matter of fact, he's 29. My 29-year-old son, Eli Humes, he's actually a pro. He's 9-1. Oh, wow. And he's a pro. He's not in the UFC yet, but he went and got married and had kids. So he's kind of, he hasn't fought in a year. And, I keep saying, you're not getting any younger, Eli. Are you going to continue this? So he's very good at it. We got all my 4 kids, like I said, my 4 boys stayed with it. My oldest son is 47. That's Todd. Then Josh is 30. Then Eli, I think, is 29. And then Jacob is 23. Okay. And they're 4 of the best, my best friends, the best black belt instructors. I'm blowing my horn a little bit. I'm very proud of my kids.
That's good.
And they all did their own thing. Eli teaches in Pittsburgh at a premier karate school. Josh at a premier karate school also. And then Todd, my oldest son, is in Erie at our dojo. He came up with his own. He's into physical fitness as well as martial arts, and he calls it cardio, like cardio and karate mixed together. Yep. And he does that. So yeah, they all do their own. They all came from our style, but it's neat to see them branch out into other things besides our style. So to me, martial arts is a never ending quest for knowledge, that there's just so much out there. And after all these years, I remember somebody saying, well, how come you're not a 10th degree, a grandmaster? And my answer is, I don't know everything. I just, I'm trying, but there is just so much in, to me, to be called a grandmaster, you've got to be pretty knowledgeable in martial arts, period. And I'm still learning. Even though I've been doing this, when we go to a tournament, I might see something and say, well, that is different. Bring it back to the dojo. We'll work on it and we make it our own. So to me, it's a never ending quest.
That's cool. I love it. So in all your years, like I said, you've been doing this a long time, but is there one philosophy for you that is at the top of your list that really stands out?
One more time. Yeah. It's kind of like, to me, I would have to say that what I just mentioned is one more time. I always say one more time. My philosophy is to get better, to get really, really good in martial arts. You got to dedicate. Number 1, you got to dedicate yourself. Number 2, you literally have to keep doing it one more time. That's cool. And I believe with just a good work ethic that you can. And I remember seeing kids my one son, I don't want to use the term unathletic. Mm-hmm. I've seen kids that come in that looks like they could not chew bubble gum and walk at the same time. And I remember seeing them grow from being that very little insecure weakling to a wonderful instructor. And that I get so much pleasure out of seeing. You can take almost everybody with that philosophy of saying one more time. And like Bruce Lee's quote was, I fear the man that can just do one kick and he does it 10,000 times instead of the guy that does 10,000 things just once. Yeah. So to me, again, Bruce Lee obviously was another big impact in my life, the movie, and his books, that there's just so much just common sense that we don't think of every day, but be like water. To me, just my philosophy is one more time, stay with it and just you're going to get better and better and better. Just one more time.
I like it. How about a worst martial arts related injury?
A matter of fact, I do have a good one.
Okay.
My son, Todd, and I were sparring about 8 years ago, and I was getting ready to do a axe kick with my left leg, and I pushed off on my right leg, and you're going to love this. I heard this bang, boom. I went to the floor, and I said to Todd, Todd, I think I was shot. He said, Dad, that sounded like it came from you. And because I'm deaf in my left ear, so I have a hard time, kind of determining where sound comes from. Mm-hmm. But it sounded like a gunshot. So I got up and I tried to walk, and I fell right back down. And I said, Todd, help me. So he helped me, and I went down. I felt my Achilles heel. It snapped in half. And it was like a rubber band breaking with a big snap. And that was probably my worst. That was very painful.
Wow.
Yeah, that was, like I said, I still remember. It was 8 years ago. And I remember when I went to the doctor, the surgeon, and I told him what happened. He said, how did it happen? And I told him. And he said, did you warm up? And I said, no, I think we just started sparring. He goes, well, number one, you should know better. He said, and he actually said this to me. He said, you're over 50. You weigh 200 pounds. And I'm 6 foot. So 200 pounds isn't bad, but as I'm getting older, a little bit less weight would do me good. But he said, you're heavier than what your body frame should carry. And, you're getting old. He said, and you did not warm up. He said, if you would have just did simple get up on your toes and raise it, like arch your toes up. Yep. He said, if you would just do 10, 15 of those, he said it would have put blood flow to that. And he said, you probably wouldn't have snapped it. He said, and I remember after he told me that, and I remember always telling people, you got to stretch before you kick. But did I listen to myself? No. So lesson learned. Yeah. Always warm up.
Oh, my age now, I'll be 51 this month. But yeah, I'll sometimes go into the dojo on the weekends and just spend an hour stretching and do nothing else.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. At 67, I'm with you. I do an awful lot of stretching. Because like I said, like you, I still fight. I still do kata. I still do weapon kata. I don't want to give it up. I love sparring. So it's almost as I get older, I have noticed on the days off, I'm sore like never before.
Yep.
But once I get back to dojo, I feel much better. So I try to stay busy and a lot more stretching now, though.
That's good. I know you talked a little bit about the UFC, and you watched that original one back in '93, and you said your son's a fighter now. I'm curious, as a fan, do you prefer the old school early '90s style versus style, or do you prefer kind of the sport that has become now?
I know I get some argument on this. I just feel, to me, it should be with some rules. Mm-hmm. Such as, there should be I feel a time limit. I feel the way they have it set up pretty good, but I'm against, the one kick that they do when they kick right at the knee.
Yeah.
To me, that is career ending.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there should, because again, these are men and women that are athletes, that they train very hard for this. And to me, if I was Dana White, I would get that oblique kick. I would get that no more kicking downward at the knee. And I believe they said the 12 o'clock elbow coming down.
Yep. I
disagree with that also, because again, that could be career ending. So again, these are athletes. You trained your whole life for this, and just by a simple kick, blow out your knee or give you many concussions from those elbows. So, I mean, I love the fight, and I just think that, and I know a lot of people, it's a fight. It's, to me, well, that's what happened back in the Colosseum back in Rome, and people died.
Yeah.
We don't want nobody dying. So I'm glad there are some rules. So I prefer now versus then.
Okay, good. So I have a few fun questions we use to wrap up the interview. Now we were just talking about like MMA and the UFC. Let's say you were going to step into the octagon. What song is playing as you're walking into the cage? What's your walk-up music going to be?
Wow, that's a good one. I would have to say, just because the movie Rocky meant so much to me, was Eye of the Tiger.
Nice. I love it. That's actually one of my ringtones on my phone. So
Cool.
That one's actually picked that one and the actual theme to Rocky are picked a decent amount. And I usually pick You're the Best from the Karate Kid. I like that one.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of good ones out there, but cool. All right. Now, this one, it doesn't have to be 4 names. I've had people give as few as 2 and as many as 8, but 3, 4, 5 names that you would put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts.
I actually, could I go off and say I have 2?
Okay.
My first Rushmore would be when I was younger, coming up through the ranks and getting my black belt. Would be, at that time, was very influential, would be Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris,
nice,
Tom Meyers, and Billy Blanks.
Okay.
My now Rushmore would be Todd Humes, Eli Humes, Josh Humes, and Jacob Humes, my 4 sons.
I like it.
They inspire me. You know, I get choked up when I see them teaching and see that they're as passionate as I was and to see what they've accomplished. And just a real quick side note, my one son, Josh, the 30-year-old, when he was 5 years old, him and Eli were jumping up and down on the bed, and he come running in, and me and my wife, we said, what happened? His right eye was pointing inward. So we took him to the eye doctor. We went to Pittsburgh. They did an MRI, and the surgeon came out and said, just as you and I are talking, he said, your son, and I didn't know what that was. He said, your son has a medulloblastoma. It's wrapped around his brainstem, and he's going to pass away. We give him about 3 weeks, so just take him home and be comfortable.
Wow.
And me and my wife looked at each other like, what? And he said, I'll let you process that. And he walked out of the room. My wife started crying, and I went, no way, no. So he came back in the room, and we said, can we operate? And he said, no, he'll probably he would pass away on the table because it's wrapped around his brainstem. And then my wife said, well, is it our right can you try? And he said, yeah. So they got a team together. Within 2 days, the operation was 17 hours.
Wow.
About the 13th hour, a doctor came out and said, we're finishing up. We're peeling off the brainstem. It's taken some time, but we think we have most of it. So they got done, and he said, we're going to follow up with radiation the first year, and then the second year chemo. So he's got a long recovery. That night, my wife had a dream, and in this dream, an angel came to her and said, when you walk into the room and you see him and he's going to smile, that's a sign that he's going to make it. Me and my wife walked into that room the next day to finally see him, and his head was all Band-Aids, all wrapped up. He was hooked up to all kinds of machines. And all you could see was his face, and he smiled.
Nice.
And we knew then he was going to be okay. And here he is, 30 years old, doing wonderful, cancer-free, wonderful.
That's awesome.
He is a big inspiration. So, again, all my kids have, different qualities, and that's what makes them so neat. And I know, like with Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris and Tom Meyers and Billy Blank, everybody has their own niche in karate and in life, and you excel at that. And I think you just become, in my mind, martial arts can open you up and to bring the best part of you out in different ways, not just martial arts. So, that's my story.
That's cool. I love it. Before I get to the next question, another one that I just thought of. Have you ever thought of writing a book?
I have. I actually wrote a book. My one son, Todd, is also just written a book, and he's going to get it published. And I wrote a book called Kids, Karate, and Christ.
Nice.
And in my book, it was a comparison. I would go along, say, what does Christ do for you? And what did martial arts? And throughout the whole book, I weave how it's intertwined to not just spiritually, but body, just to be a better person. And it's also a learning book. So I've been working on that, and I would like to get that published.
Okay, you have to let me, as soon as you get it published, let me know, and I'll add the link to the episode when it comes out.
Oh, absolutely.
So I can add stuff. I just had another guest that released a new book that his episode came out 2 years ago, and I just added the link to it a couple weeks ago. So
wonderful.
No problem to do that in the future. So definitely stay in touch about
great.
that. But so how about a favorite martial arts book?
Hands down is Tao of Tum.
Bruce Lee.
Nice. Bruce Lee. Actually, my son just bought me another book, Striking. I forget what the name of it is. I think his daughter, Bruce Lee's daughter, wrote it, I believe.
Oh, yes,
and
the new.
I'm only maybe 3 chapters in, but very, a lot of Bruce Lee sayings. Yeah, his books are full of knowledge. I mean, it blows your mind, not just in the philosophy, they're wonderful books. So I think this new one is going to be one of my favorites too.
Yeah, no, I just had Mark Dacascos was just telling me about that. Breath of the Dragon, is that the one? Yeah. That's on my list. I got to order that because that's
absolutely.
Yeah, he said very good things about it, and I think you're the second person that's mentioned it. So
I heard a little bit of that podcast with Mark. I remember seeing him on some of the movies, and I went, wow, I remember him as a little kid and seeing what he's accomplished. It's really, again, martial arts is just phenomenal what it does to people.
Yeah, definitely. This one, who knows? Maybe you have an answer, maybe you don't. But did you ever get into video games? Do you have a favorite martial arts video game?
Through the years, I know there's so many, but I remember years, like when my first son was little, it was a game called Street Fighter.
Yep.
And I remember playing that with him, and I know, from Mortal Kombat that there's all kinds of them now. And my son just got the new UFC, which I watched a little bit of it last night, watched him play, and I went, that game looks good too, but Street Fighter would be my game.
Cool. Just for fun, I need to pull one out and play one because I haven't played a martial arts video game in probably 20 years. But I used to play Tekken. I used to play Mortal Kombat. I used to play Street Fighter. I used to play Double Dragon. And I know a lot of those you can play online for free, and there's new versions. But I just need to go out. I did go right after my show started. I found one of the original, like early 80s karate games online and went and tried playing it online, and it was really bad. But I just don't have the time to do it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
How about a favorite martial arts TV show?
To me, I don't know if it would fall under that category, but I remember as a kid watching Green Hornet with Bruce Lee in it.
Yep.
And Kato just amazed me. And the saddest episode was when it was a crossover that Robin actually looked like he was beating up Bruce Lee, and that hurt my feelings. I went, no way could that happen. So, but it would have to be Green Hornet.
Yeah, no, I have the whole series on DVD. I love it. That's so cool.
Yep.
All right, how about a favorite martial arts movie?
Hands down, Enter the Dragon.
Nice. I think that one's picked the most out of anyone. That's such a great movie.
Because it's got, all the weapons. It's got the very first scene is mixed martial arts. He's tapping the guy out.
Yep, the armbar. Yep.
So it covers everything.
Cool. Yeah, I love it. I still watch it. Probably once a year. So nice.
Yep, me too.
All right, final question. This one doesn't have to be a martial arts movie. Any movie you've ever seen. Favorite movie fight scene.
To me, it's an easy one, I think. It would have to be, and I know the movie was under 2 different names. I can't think of the other name, but at that time it was called Return of the Dragon, was Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris in the Coliseum.
Yeah. That
fight scene was very epic. I think they did it really well. Hands down, and I know, Jackie Chan. I know there's other, maybe a little bit more acrobats or more. Mm-hmm. This was karate back then, and it brought out the basic, the good stances, a good roundhouses, a good backhands, a good punches. Everything was I obviously choreographed, but it was well done. So, hands down. Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, Return of the Dragon. Yeah, I think it was also called Way of the Dragon was the other name. Yeah, that was the other name, Nice. No, that's another good one. That one I haven't watched in a while. I need to dig that one out and watch it again. So, cool. Yeah, it's been years, Before I let you go, is there anything I forgot to ask you or we just want to be sure to get out there before we wrap it up? Let me see. No, that's about it. I just... to tell everybody, or mostly parents, to get their kids in good martial arts. And because it can change your life for the betterment.
Yes.
I firmly believe that with all my heart. I still do it. And one of the things, again, not when you hear parents say, you have helped my son out, you have helped my daughter out so much, that right there is the reward.
Yeah.
And throughout the years, I remember I've had probably maybe 10 different, like autism or HCA or whatever the case may be, that when they start martial arts, they don't know what to expect. And 9 times out of 10, the parents say this was the best thing for them.
Yep.
It gives them structure. It gives them, an outlet, So to me, it's not just, it's martial arts can be therapeutic also. So I like to say, it's martial arts is open for everybody and anybody. And I remember a gentleman he lost his arm in a car accident. And he thought, I can't spar. He was really depressed. And then when he started coming, that he found out that he could spar, that he can block with the other hand, and he could kick. And it sometimes, you help people without you helping them. You just doing your thing because you love martial arts, but you can see the results at the end. So just, it's open to everybody, and everybody can. And one of my mantras is everybody can shine in martial arts. Everybody can. So
nice. I like it. Yeah. And I tell people all the time, I think everyone at some point in their life should try it for at least a good solid year. And the other thing is never too old. So many parents are like, whenever I see, like, I go to the kids class and I see parents are like, when are you going to join? Oh, I'm too old. Like, no, you're not. Trust me. I've had so many guests that have joined in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And it's like, just no, if you want to do it, do it. You may not be able to join the same style as your kid. Maybe some styles are easier, for younger people, but find a style and try it.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, David, seriously, man, this has been so much fun. I love hearing your story. I'm so glad that you're still going strong and still doing it and still teaching and doing it with your kids, which is awesome. And I really think people are going to enjoy this episode, and I hopefully meet you in person someday too.
Oh yeah. I've been following you, since my son introduced me to you, and my hat is off to you that to do what you're doing is, to me, is to getting the word out that all martial artists, the ones that you have on the show, that we care, that we're not just teaching kids to go bully people or to beat up people, that, that, like I always say, when you say martial arts, it is an art within itself. It's not just you go learn how to beat up people, so yeah. I think what you're doing is wonderful to get the word out that it's a positive thing, not a negative thing. So I thank you for letting me be on your show, and I hope you continue this, because I enjoy listening to you and your show. So keep it up, Brian.
I appreciate it, and I will, as long as people keep saying yes to be interviewed, I will keep doing it as long as I can. So I like I said, I truly appreciate your time, and it's been a blast.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.